ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 4 of Pigskin Glory. I'm fresh off my trip to Amity Island, where I was not eaten by Jaws, thankfully, and it is time to look at November's 1st through 10th, 1975 in football. And also, if you follow us on social media, Pigskin Glory Football 50 years ago today on Facebook, today I put up a video about a wrestling card from November 11th, 1975, sort of tying in pop culture and what was going on then. But let's go ahead and bring the Pigskin Glory up on the screen so we can take a look at what's going on in the world of pro football. We left off Halloween night. You've gone out, gotten your candy. Anybody who dressed like Jaws or I don't know what else is big in 1950, maybe President Ford. And it's now time to get back to football on Saturday, November 1st. But before we do that, let me go ahead and introduce my partners in Pigskin Glory. He is from Wisconsin and a Buffalo Bills fan, living in Cheeseland, Chris Krager.
No one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
And from out on the West Coast, he may be 3 hours behind us and the sun is still shining out there, he is a baseball expert, ladies and gentlemen, Charles Delano.
Good afternoon. Well, good evening.
So, where we've left off, we begin with some bad news. Unfortunately, a former NFL player was found floating off Bar Harbor Pier, died on November 1st, 1975, or at least his body was found. Fritz Lovin, guard from Minneapolis Red Jackets. He played in the NFL in 1929. Sad news to begin November of 1975, and there's really no transition from this, so we're just going to move on. But we do want to mention when an NFL player passes to remember him, Fritz Lovin from the Minneapolis Red Jackets. Now it's also passing away on November 1st, 1975. Bob Swigger, wingback, blocking back, and halfback of the New York Yankees. Yes, the football New York Yankees, 1946 and 48, and the Chicago Rockets from 1949, Bob Swigger. And last, as well, on November 1st, 1975, Randy Young, end from the 1920 Decatur Staleys. Guys, Chris, let me start with you on these passings. It's never an easy time, but you do learn a lot about football history. There's a lot of people, even in the 70s, that might not have known there was a New York Yankees football team.
Because when you think 1940s Yankees, most people obviously think of the legends of the Pinstripes. Well, there was another set of New York Yankees indeed, and maybe they didn't have quite the success of their baseball counterparts, but New York football is still New York football.
And Charles, like I said, there's no real easy way to transition out of this, but the show goes on, the game goes on, and I'm sure the families of those players are proud of their accomplishments, and all we can do is thank them for their time in the NFL and entertaining us all. Yeah, we get right into the high school report and a special note on John McKay. Out of North Carolina, Sanford wins again 42-6, and that's John Morris, number 33, as he eyes Jordan's Mike Hardwick. And then the other story, or the other day, is the John McKay note. And Chris, big news coming out of Southern Cal is John McKay is going to be joining the NFL in 1976.
Oh, and you've coached as long as you have at USC. You've won so much, you figured, what's another Rose Bowl or two? I might as well try something else. It's one thing to go to Pasadena. If you can win a Rose Bowl, maybe you can win a Super Bowl someday.
Charles, joining an expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what kind of obstacles does a man like John McKay have to face building a team from scratch?
I think it's difficult transitioning from college football to pro football, regardless of whether the team is an expanded team or not. Chuck Fairbanks, who had a pretty good college football record in Oklahoma, he's having trouble adjusting to the pros with the New England Patriots, and this is second or third year as coach of the Patriots. So this guy is going to have his work cut out for him in St. Pete.
Some of the big names like Barry Switzer, Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler, Joe Paterno have not made this jump. So John McKay is trying to do something that is not unprecedented. Paul Brown obviously went from college to the pros in 1946, and it's been done with success in the past. But John McKay has got a big task with an expansion team, and we don't know, of course, how the expansion draft is going to play out, what players are going to be available, who gets the top pick, because there's two expansion teams in Seattle and Tampa Bay. It's going to be a lot of obstacles down in North or Central Florida for John McKay.
Going for them that he don't have to worry about the WFL since that league is gone.
Now, it's Saturday, but that doesn't stop the NFL from making moves. Kansas City Chiefs have signed guard Gary Palmer, previously released by the Chiefs, so they re-signed him, and they placed Roger Barnhart on the injured reserve, while the Washington Redskins have signed free agent guard Jim Arneson and released lineman Martin Imhoff. Chris, New England's not making any moves on this Saturday, but the Chiefs and Redskins are.
The Chiefs' moves are a little interesting because, they got a Monday night game looming in a couple weeks, and they've had a tough schedule. But when you're in the AFC West, you can't just stand idly by. Never mind Oakland. Denver seems to be on the up and up, so they got to try and keep up with the Broncos, never mind the Raiders.
Charles, these are the Cowboys' next two opponents. Do you think that potentially playing a Super Bowl favorite has anything to do with these teams making moves on a Saturday?
I don't think it matters that much. You gotta be the best Imperial Ball Club at all times.
Now we get into the games.
The fact I had a day before they're playing Dallas was maybe some moments. I don't know.
We get into the games next. It's a big eight matchup. Nebraska and Missouri. The Cornhuskers take down the Tigers 30-7. Chris, the Cornhuskers broke open a tight 10-7 game with a fake punt. What kind of momentum swing do you think that did to Nebraska? And Missouri, they were in it in the first half, but then after that they just fell away, losing by 23.
That's one thing to give up a touchdown before halftime, but a fake touchdown when you're the underdog and the heavy favorite has resort, that can really take the wind out of your sails. And the more you look at things from Missouri, that Labor Day night upset of Alabama feels like a long time ago.
And Charles, Vince Ferragamo throwing 2 touchdowns. Nebraska's not really known as a passing team, but when you have a quarterback like Vince Ferragamo, why not?
Talk down the fault of the way. You got to feel Missouri right there. That upset they had, it definitely feels like 10 years ago now.
Now,
and remember, they're not that far. And remember, and let's not forget, they recently got blown up by Colorado.
Interesting to note that the title on this YouTube game is the Bummerooski. We've talked about NFL lore in the past. College football has some games just like this. I'm not sure Bummerooski if that has anything to do with a fake punt, but that's an interesting name. Definitely something to check out. If you're a Nebraska fan, you might even know if you've been around as long as this to remember from the podcast. Charles, there was a Saturday game and involved a California team. In an untelevised game, the Giants cut down the San Diego Chargers 35-24. This game between two teams with a combined 2 wins may not have been televised, but at least it had scoring. The game was back and forth. Charles, what do you think about the NFL having non-televised games on Saturdays? Does that do any injustice to the fans, especially the road team?
I don't know the answer to that one, but I think I've said our last podcast, the reason the Giants had to play Saturday, because I think the Jets play at Shea Stadium on Sunday, and don't forget, because the Yankees and Mets played at Shea Stadium in 75, while Yankee Stadium was in the final stage of its renovation, all 4 teams had to play in the same stadium. They had no choice.
The 75 is definitely a congested year in New York City, not just from traffic, but also the 4 teams having to share Shea Stadium.
Oh, shit.
All right. This one would have been good if Mark had been able to join us. Penn State and Maryland. Number 9, Penn State escapes the Terrapins 15-13. The Nittany Lions played down, much like the Syracuse Orangemen do, but were even closer to disaster. The Terrapins had a 42-yard field goal with 31 seconds left to shock the football world, but missed it by 3 feet. Chris, 3 feet. If Maryland makes that field goal, what does that do to Penn State's season?
Considering they're an independent, it would have really taken them out of the major bowl picture because they're not tied into a conference. But again, You're playing down in the competition. That loss at Ohio State can only carry you so far when you're not exactly playing a conference schedule, and this would have been an inexcusable loss.
Charles, do you think Joe Paterno had...
Especially down State yet?
No.
Charles, do you think Joe Paterno would have had any nightmares had they lost this game?
The Woodchucks Chuck Wood? Of course he would have had nightmares.
Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Another Big 8 matchup as the number 2 Sooners lasso the Cowboys 27-7. Boomer Sooner made it 28 straight wins thanks to 304 rushing yards and 3 forced fumbles. And Horace Ivory scored 2 touchdowns. Chris, Oklahoma, they're number 2 in the nation. Do we get to see a number 1 versus number 2 matchup? Or will bowl tie-ins ruin that?
I think the bowl tie-ins, because number 1 is Ohio State and number 2 is Oklahoma. And remember, Big Ten teams don't play bowl games outside of Pasadena, and where Oklahoma plays, they're locked into the Orange Bowl.
So, Charles, if that happens, if Oklahoma and Ohio State finish the season 1 and 2, who do the pollsters choose as your national champion if they both finish 1 and 2?
I guess the strength of schedule for both these teams.
Their bowl opponent might have a lot to do with it too, whoever they have to face in the bowl.
Good point.
This is an interesting matchup for me because it's one of my favorite division nowadays Division FCS team and an FBS team. Back then, they're both Division 1, not till 78 where we get the separation. Richmond Spiders, Georgia Bulldogs. The Bulldogs escaped the Spiders' web 28-24. Georgia got more of a fight than they ever thought against the Richmond of all teams. In a game that had 7 lead changes, Georgia got 2 touchdowns each from Kevin McLeod and Matt Robinson to escape. Chris, Richmond, they're not at the big school like Georgia is, but they sure came out and played like it down between the hedges on this day.
I mean, that's why you play the games. And, remember, we're not that far off removed from Georgia losing as a 2-touchdown favorite to Ole Miss. They had a tough game against Kentucky. This just doesn't feel like a vintage Georgia team because they kind of struggle against the teams they should beat.
Michigan and Minnesota, Big Ten matchup. Number 7 Michigan holds off the Gophers. The Gophers were down 21-7 early. They tied things up, but Gordon Bell saved the day for the Maize and Blue with a game-winning 23-yard touchdown as part of his 172-yard performance. Charles, 172 yards out of Gordon Bell. He's not the name of Archie Griffin or Joe Washington, but where does Michigan rank in the rushing tandems of college football in 75?
It's got to be right up among the best. I guess you could say the Michigan Wolverines were saved by the...
No doubt. Toronto and Hamilton were coming to the end of the Canadian football season, and the Tiger Cats claw my Argonauts 26-10. Hamilton's only path to make the playoff was to win by at least 16 points, and that's what they did. 2 block punts led to a pair of Ticat touchdowns. 3 field goals accounted for the needed margin, and their defense kept Toronto out of range for a potential rouge that would have salvaged Toronto's Ivor win nightmare. Chris, they had to win by 16 the way the CFL tiebreakers work. They did. Is this mission accomplished for the Tiger Cats?
Yes, because every point matters, every game matters. If they won by 15, they would not have gone in. It had to be 16, and they got to it. This is why every point, that's why the defense at the end, because if Toronto had gone to Rouge, it would have been 15 points and they would have gotten in.
Texas and SMU, the Southern Methodists here in this Longhorn battle. Running back duel. We talked about running backs earlier, Charles. Earl Campbell out of Texas, 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wayne Morris from SMU, 202 yards and 2 touchdowns. The difference, the Longhorns got 3 field goals while the Mustangs mustered 0. If this isn't the greatest rushing game of the season in Texas, or maybe not, Charles, I don't know what is.
What a loss. No pun intended. I mean, 2 guys combined for 362 rushing yards of 2 touchdowns each.
Just from 2 men.
A Woody Hayes special, as it were.
Speaking of Woody Hayes, Chris,
Woody Hayes?
Ohio State, number 1, they get past Indiana 24-14. The Hoosiers fell behind. The Buckeyes 17-0, but did score 14 straight. However, an interception led to a Mr. Touchdown. Pete Johnson score that salted away in monumental effort for Indiana. Does struggling to blow out Indiana hurt Ohio State's ranking?
I don't think so, because Oklahoma, if you recall, Vinny, they had some struggles. They had a close games with Texas, close games with Miami. Ohio State, Oklahoma was on their struggle bus. This is Ohio State's version.
Arizona State and Utah, that's the number 10 ranked Sun Devils. They scorched the Utah Utes 40-14. The Sun Devils got passing and running touchdowns from each of their quarterbacks. Arizona's defense was the story of the game, though, thanks to their staggering 9 interceptions. Charles, the bakery was open up in Salt Lake City for the Sun Devils, and 2 of those picks were by Mike Haynes.
Wow. 10 turnovers total?
Yep.
Wow. I bet. Which makes me so the bad? Was it cherry turnovers? Was it the blueberry or maybe orange?
I probably have. Well, that depends. What's the favorite? Whatever the favorite fruit of Utah is.
Maybe. I go with cherry.
USC and Cal. Ricky Bell ran for 121 yards. I can't believe we didn't mention these 2 running backs. We were talking running backs. For us, he wasn't the best. Bell wasn't the best running back on the field, Chris. Chuck Muncie had 146 yards and 62 receiving. The real difference, though, is the quarterback play, as the Trojans only got 44 yards passing, while Joe Roth of the Bears, 244 and 2 scores. What an upset.
Cal, USC had some close games. They had the struggles at times. They've had a lot of close games. It finally caught up to them. They were playing with fire against Oregon, Purdue, Iowa. But they finally got burned today. And how much do you think that John McKay thing may have played in this game? Remember, the Buccaneers announcement was made before they kicked off in Berkeley.
Yeah, the news was broken on the morning papers. And you got to think that maybe, Charles, the players were emotionally distraught going into this game, especially the underclassmen.
I can understand it, especially if it was a favorite coach they like playing on this coach, and they find out that he's going to be leaving. It's gonna cast some doubts.
Now, Chris, would John McKay perhaps be possibly thinking that Ricky Bell might look good in the orange and red of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
He's probably hoping he doesn't end up on the Seahawks.
Yep. This is a touchdown from that California USC game. It is Joe Roth, who threw for 2 touchdowns this day. Here he is hitting a familiar name to football fans of the 80s. Wesley Walker was a Cal Golden Bear from, I believe it's about 16 yards out.
Jets legend.
Yep. Alabama and Mississippi State. Number 6, Alabama tames the Bulldogs 21-10. Mississippi State, with a shocking 10-7 lead, threatened to hand Bama their first SEC loss since 1972. But a pick six turned the tide, so to speak, and then the tide rolled to a game-sealing fourth-quarter touchdown. Chris, Tyrone King's 26-yard pick six, how does that propel Alabama? Did they raise in the rankings, especially with Ohio State struggling?
I don't know, because Alabama's schedule hasn't been monstrous, but you have to think about Alabama. When they were at home, they obliterated TCU in Washington. A little different on the road, but, they are winning these games, and, in the race for the Sugar Bowl, every win counts.
Yes. San Jose State, Charles. They're up against Fresno State in a local battle, number 18. The Spartans are 18th in the nation, and they beat down on the Bulldogs 21-7. Ranked, they relied on their defense to get past Fresno State, recovering 2 fumbles to set up a pair of touchdowns and holding the Bulldogs to a net total of -1 yards rushing. Charles, what does this win do for San Jose State?
It definitely goes to Law Commons. Who knows? No, maybe Michael Bonner can get into a bowl game against a Bulldog team that apparently didn't have any teeth. Certainly when it came to rushing.
By the way, I should mention, Charles, San Jose State's only loss, Cal, the team that beat USC. Even your one loss isn't exactly a terrible one.
Yeah.
We still got another game up in Canada before the night ends. Edmonton and British Columbia. The Eskimos declaw the Lions 12-8. The Eskimos had clinched the West while BC had a chance to clinch a spot in the playoffs, but the Lions had used up all their energy to upset Saskatchewan. It showed as despite what was essentially a baseball score, the Esks did enough to finish 12-4, their best record since 1957. Chris, with the season coming to an end, is it Edmonton's Grey Cup to lose?
Well, it definitely appears that way because, obviously when you haven't had a record this good since when you won a Grey Cup in 1957, teams like teams like Hamilton have been winning recent years. Edmonton's been a bit of a lull, but this might be their time to bust through.
All right, November 2nd, Sunday morning, you wake up, you get out your newspaper, the scores aren't done in college. Notre Dame versus the Navy, the Irish turn back the midshipmen with a resounding defeat. We take a look at the picture here. Navy's John Koralski fields trouble ahead from Pete Johnson, not the same Pete Johnson that's been scoring for Ohio State, and game star Jeff Weston. The play was stopped for no gain. Charles, Notre Dame, they're not ranked, but they're still giving it all their effort. What's up with the Notre Dame-Navy rivalry? Will Navy ever get back in the winning column?
Sure, Navy's gotta get back in the win column. And it's for a school with a good tradition of Flying Irish, the pride there is always gonna be there, whether the top 25 ranked or not.
Just a quick thought on this game, Vinny. If you think about Notre Dame after those 3 straight heart-stopping games, the comebacks and the USC game, they were due for a rare blowout win.
Yes. All right, we got some transactions before we get to the games for the day. Looks like it's the same listing from Saturday.
It's the same guys. It's the same Washington guard, Kansas City guard, same guys.
All right, so let's move on. Just a newspaper reporting them a day late. The games from Sunday. The NFL action, this is week 6, I believe? 7, week 7. Minnesota gets past Green Bay 28-17 for the third straight game. The Vikings had a tough battle versus a division rival, but Minnesota improved to 7-0 thanks to 3 touchdown passes by Fran Tarkenton, 2 of them in the fourth quarter. Charles, the Vikings are 7-0. We just witnessed an undefeated Super Bowl champion 3 years ago. Is Minnesota the team that's going to duplicate that mark just 3 years later?
Fran Tarkenton, boy, I guess you could say if they can do that, then that's incredible. The sequel.
And remember that Dolphins team that went undefeated was coming off a Super Bowl loss, a la the Vikings last year. Maybe they're following that path.
Maybe.
The picture from the newspaper, that is Minnesota running back Ed Marinaro, who had just played for Cornell as last year. Marinaro a rookie or is it his second year?
I think this is his second year. He was on their 74 team.
Okay. The Bills and the Jets. Buffalo circles the Jet Wagons 24-23, trailing 23-10. It looked like the Bills were headed for their third straight loss. But Joe Ferguson threw a clutch 64-yard touchdown pass in the fourth quarter to O.J. Simpson. After blowing double-digit leads the previous 2 weeks, this time the shoe was on the Buffalo's right foot. Chris, Buffalo off the losing streak. O.J. Simpson with a huge touchdown. Going forward now, still a game behind the Miami Dolphins. Does this right the wagons, so to speak, for the Buffalo Bills?
I definitely think it does because, they've got the Colts who are good, but they're still not quite there yet. They got a couple of games with New England. Minnesota may not have much to play for, but all it comes down to is, does Miami slip up? Because if the Bills keep winning, Miami, remember, they haven't lost since week 1.
Yep. The Steelers and the Bengals. Pittsburgh beat Cincinnati 30-24 in a battle of AFC Central heavyweights. The Steelers knocked off undefeated Cincinnati from the ranks of the unbeatens. Despite losing the turnover battle 3-2, they jumped on the Bengals 23-3 thanks to 239 yards rushing and 4 sacks. Charles, Cincinnati's no longer undefeated. Pittsburgh gets the win to edge them in the division. It's going to be a dogfight to the end. Who wins the AFC Central?
No shit. I mean, the defending champions, the Steelers, the Cincinnati Bengals, and to say nothing of the upstart Houston Oilers. They're real bad for Cleveland Browns fans.
Chris.
And the sad part is, and here's the sad part, Charles, the Browns haven't even gotten into the meat of their division schedule yet.
Chris, the Falcons and Saints. The NFC West, New Orleans takes down Atlanta 23-7. The first indoor battle between the Falcons and Saints was a super debacle for the visitors. 6 turnovers, 5 sacks of 2 Atlanta quarterbacks. Chris, how bad were the Falcons on this day?
They look so bad that they probably are wishing they'd go back to Tulane Stadium. Remember, just 2 years ago, they beat the Saints in Tulane Stadium. They scored 61 points. Now they're basically they made the Saints look like the Raiders.
Charles, here's a picture of Dave Hampton fumbling the ball for the Saints. We've been talking about all the great, for the Falcons. I'm sorry, we've been talking about all the great running backs in college football. Maybe Atlanta should be looking at one of them.
Yeah, for this game anyway, the New Orleans Saints are actually Saints as opposed to the New Orleans.
One day.
Yep. All right, now we get the Browns and Colts. Baltimore stops Cleveland 21-7. These two teams appear to be two teams appear to be two ships passing in the night as a hot team with a youthful Baltimore led by the Rusan rifle Burt Jones, 2 touchdowns, looked better than winless Cleveland and Mike Phipps, 2 interceptions and 0 touchdown performance. Chris, the Colts, they appear to be on the right track. The Browns going nowhere fast. How important is this game for Baltimore?
When you're the Colts, when you start 1-4, you basically have no margin for error. And with games against Buffalo and Miami looming, this was a game you couldn't stumble award since the Browns at this point look like they'd probably lose to the Edmonton Eskimos.
Montreal and Ottawa up in Canada as we're wrapping up the season up there. The Rough Riders ride past Les Alouettes 46-6. In a one-game showdown for the CFL East crown turned into an absolute shellacking. Ottawa's first 5 drives all resulted in points. It was 25-0 at halftime. Charles, Montreal did not show up for this game.
Le Sacre Bleu, Les Bras.
Let's take a look at the picture here from the newspaper. It is Dick Adams brushes off Montreal's big defensive end, Junior Ahieu, with a well-armed straight arm. The Alouettes just...
By the way, note that name, Tom Clements. That is the guy who is actually Jordan Love's quarterback coach in Green Bay.
No doubt. Back to the NFL, Charles, and we got the Dolphins and the Bears. Miami clobber Chicago 46-13. The Dolphins no letdown after last week's escape at Buffalo. Bob Greasy, Earl Morrall combining for 4 touchdown passes. Miami, Oakland, Pittsburgh all leading their respective divisions. The more things change, Charles, the more they stay the same in the AFC.
Well, the Dolphins won 2 Super Bowls. The Steelers are the defending champion. I got these 3 teams are not ready to give up on their crown just yet. The Raiders haven't feel snake bad, despite that they won more games than any team in the NFL over the last 8 years. Still have not caught the bouquet.
And Charles, let me go deeper into that. Of their last 5 postseason eliminations, the last 3 have been at the hands of Miami and Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Boston, coming off the World Series loss, now has to deal with this. St. Louis subdues New England 24-17. The Patriots look to be on track for 3 straight wins, leading 17-7, but a fumble return touchdown, or thanks to a fumble return touchdown. But the Cardiac Cards come back to win once again thanks to Terry Metcalf's 3 touchdowns, a second-quarter punt return, and 2 fourth-quarter rushing scores. Charles, we talked a lot in this episode so far about running backs, but Terry Metcalf maybe doesn't get the press he deserves sometimes when he has performances like this.
Wow. If you're playing on a team that's struggling, you're not going to get a lot of recognition. It's as simple as that.
Actually, Charles, the Cardinals aren't actually struggling. I mean, they're actually up there in the top. And, you know, we talk about the 3 teams in the AFC. The NFC has been run by the Cowboys and the Vikings and the Rams. St. Louis, if nothing else, is threatening them to shake things up.
And Terry Metcalf.
Got it.
Terry Metcalf could be a huge part of that changeup. The Oilers and the Chiefs. Houston edges Kansas City 17-13. The Oilers won this game at Arrowhead on the strength of 4 takeaways and 2 long touchdown passes from Dan Pastorini to double-aught Ken Burrow. Chris, Oilers, are they still shocking people, or are they perhaps we should start taking them for real?
I think we started taking them more seriously. Remember, they were 7-7 last year after winning 2 games in 72 and 73. When you go from 2 wins to 7 wins, there's just about 7 this year. I think it's safe to say that this reflects on how terrible Bill Peterson was, given that they've been winning a lot more since he left.
Because probably the Oilers could win more games this year than they have the prior 3 years combined.
Take a look at this picture on the left. John Matuzak closes in on Maddox or Asthmatic Sax Pastorini. Remember that name, John Matuzak, before the night's over. Lions and 49ers, Charles. Detroit beat San Francisco 28-17. Third-string quarterback Joe Reed filled in admirably for Greg Landry and Bill Munson. He completed 9 passes for 141 and 2 touchdowns, and the Lions got a 49-yard fumble return for a touchdown for good measure. The 49ers had this. They had a chance with both Detroit Lions quarterbacks out, but they just fell flat against Detroit.
Oh, if only we had somebody, buddy, we could grab, like maybe Joe Montana, if he continues telling it up with the Fighting Irish.
That would be an interesting pick. He is a freshman, so it's going to be a couple years, but let's stay out west. Chris, talk about the Raiders and Broncos here in the 4 p.m. window. Oakland dominating Denver 42-17. The Broncos have not won a home game versus the Raiders since 1962. Before they change to this color scheme, they'll have to wait another year thanks to 3 Oakland runners combining for 4 touchdowns in a pass rush that collected 5 sacks. Chris, what do you think about Denver's performance against the Raiders at home?
Considering that, they've held their own on the road. In fact, they've won at Oakland 2 of the previous 3 years, but I don't know what it is. It's like, it's like the Dolphins and the Bills. Like, Oakland just feels that they can't lose in Denver. And when you literally go almost 13 years without beating a team there, it grates on you. And even 2 years ago, that was a tie.
Charles, it seems like Denver's mile-high atmosphere should be a home field advantage to them, but the Raiders don't seem to think so.
Don't believe me. John Madden doesn't get off on his West Football Stadium. He's going to have his players playing possibly even at the risk of so many penalties.
Now the big game, the Cowboys and the Redskins. Washington outlast Dallas in overtime 30-24. The latest installment of Pro Football's premier rivalry has unusually high scoring. Dallas forced 6 turnovers, scored on a pick 6, and had leads of 14-3, 17-10, 24-17, but blew all 3 leads. Bill Kilmer throws 3 touchdowns. The Redskins get a clutch overtime turnover and drove for the winning score. Chris, the NFC East, you mentioned St. Louis is coming up on them. Dallas missed the playoffs in 1974. They're my pick for the NFC Championship in 1975, but this game could possibly derail their season. What do you think of that?
Well, this is where that Green Bay loss is really, really costly, because it's one thing to lose in division to a team that always splits with you. But if Dallas ends up not winning the division, missing the playoffs, that Green Bay screw-up is really, really going to bite them in the you-know-what.
Charles, from 1970 to 1972, these 3 teams represented the NFC. These 2 teams, represented the NFC in the Super Bowl. However, 73 and 74, it was Minnesota. Is the NFC East really this good, or are they just battling for second place to a Minnesota team in the Central?
I guess that depends. If the Vikings continue playing the way they are, that they do is not going to matter what these 2 old rivals are doing on the field.
We got one more game in Canada. Winnipeg versus Calgary. The Stampeders stampede the Blue Bombers 35-26. Winnipeg knew they were in the playoffs thanks to BC's loss on Saturday, so they didn't need this one. Calgary avoided the league's worst record, and running back Willie Burden broke the CFL single-season rushing record. Chris, rushing in the CFL when you only have 3 downs, 2 downs and out, that's a hard record to attain, and even in what could be a potentially horrible season for Calgary, at least they had this bright spot.
I really think that rushing in the CFL doesn't get the credit it is, because you have fewer downs, there is no 4th down, and when you have 1 less first down, that means you have less margin for error. Like, imagine if O.J. Simpson only had 3 downs instead of 4 downs.
Yep, definitely a crazy situation where passing is more of a focal point up north, and with the field being bigger, it's almost a shame because Canadian runners could gain more yards, but you got to switch it up quicker. So let's take a look at the final CFL standings, Charles. Ottawa, Edmonton, they're going to get the byes. Hamilton's going to play Montreal. Winnipeg's going to play Saskatchewan. Charles, looking at these records, Hamilton with 5 wins, do they really even have a chance going in the playoffs?
Not really against the Alouettes, eh?
Now, Chris, does Montreal show up for this game, or did they perhaps just not come to play against Ottawa thinking that they'll get them in the end?
I think they were. I think what happened was they just got floored by a haymaker that they weren't expecting. And traditionally, when teams get their butts kicked, they usually come up better the next week. But I think it's just going to be a case of momentum. How much does Montreal getting throttled versus Hamilton fighting their way in? That will be interesting.
You see that the playoff games on Saturday in the semifinals, Hamilton will be at Montreal at 2 p.m., and Winnipeg will be at Saskatchewan at 4 p.m. on Sunday the 9th. The UPI's top 20 poll, Ohio State keeps the number 1 spot. Oklahoma stays number 2. 34 votes for the Buckeyes. Charles, they didn't get the perfect 30. They didn't get a perfect score, but
42.
Yeah, they didn't get a perfect 42. Could it be their struggles against Indiana this past week that possibly did that to them?
It might have a little bit, but the Buckeyes are still the team to beat in the college football this year.
Chris, any big surprises you see? This is only the top 15 because there's a tie, so we don't know if San Jose State stayed in the top 20 according to this paper, but USC dropping to number 9th with their first loss. Notre Dame is up to 13th. I had mentioned they weren't ranked. I don't know if I just misread that or if they were ranked, but where do these teams go from here? And Ohio State, Oklahoma, Nebraska, which is the best team?
I honestly believe it might be Nebraska because, with the Buckeyes, they're usually going to run the ball. Nebraska, unlike the other 2 teams, is showing more semblance of a throwing game with Ferragamo because the Sooners and Buckeyes can appear a little one-dimensional. Now the Cornhuskers are showing we can throw too. And I think Nebraska can run, and now they got Ferragamo. I think they have the best balance.
And San Jose State is not in the top. Is not in the top 20 either.
No. This is top 15. San Jose State is ranked number 18.
Yeah, this is actually just the first 17 teams. Is 3 are tied for 15. Only 17 teams received votes, so there is no top 20 in this week. There's only 17 teams that got votes.
And the Spartans are 18th.
Monday Night Football, Rams and Eagles. LA clobbers Philadelphia 42-3. Philly recently had been competitive against the likes of Dallas and Miami and even beat Washington, but on Monday night, not so much. Charles, Rams 42-3. The NFC, they're trying to keep pace with the Vikings and Cowboys and Redskins and Cardinals. Is this a statement win for Los Angeles?
Sounds like Kevin and Alex Karras kept the audience glued in the second half of this game.
Chris, the Rams had not one, but 2 defensive touchdowns. Isaiah Robertson and Fred Dreyer both scoring. What fear does that put in offensive coordinators' minds when, the Rams can score on you on their defense?
And remember, they still have guys like Merlin Olsen and the young bloods, but I think another way to look at it is Philadelphia. Again, they've been playing up the competition. They beat the Redskins. They almost beat Dallas. They were tough with Miami. But they just didn't show up on this night.
So now we move on to Tuesday, November 4th, and we have a new cover photo, and it's from the Redskins-Cowboys game, as it was the big game of the weekend. And it's a nice color shot. I see former Buffalo Bill Ron McDowell right here in the middle, part of the Overhill gang, I should say. And looks like it's number 35. That's, oh man, the name is on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of his name, but running back for the Cowboys. Cowboys don't have the best running game as far as the NFC goes, but let's take a look at the NFL standings. Minnesota, undefeated. They're the number 1 seed right now. The Rams would be 2. The Redskins would be 3. And as of right now, it's the Cowboys who are in the playoffs over St. Louis. Charles, Rams, Vikings, Redskins, and Cowboys. It's a familiar-looking foursome in the NFC.
And they don't get a familiar foursome in the AFC as well.
Yes, we click.
By the way, Vinny, number 35 is Scott Laidlaw.
Oh, okay. In the AFC, as Charles mentioned, you got Miami and Pittsburgh, both 6-1. The Raiders are 5-2. And then your wild card team right now is actually the Houston Oilers. Chris, what a shock there. Houston in position to be in the playoffs.
Actually, it's Cincinnati because the Bengals beat the Oilers. In fact, Houston's only loss is against Cincinnati in a game we did.
Remember, when 3 teams are tied, though, it's conference record that sets that out. So, actually, that would be why Pittsburgh would be up top. Yeah, it should be Cincinnati. This is a newspaper printing error. It should be Cincinnati in the second spot.
But again, same teams but you got to appreciate your Houstons and your St. Louis's, that, hey, maybe the NFL is not basically just a 6-team league.
We're speeding through the week now. It's Wednesday, November 5th. Charles, a federal judge, overrules the NFL commissioner and says that the World Football League players can sign in the National Football League.
As well a shot.
Chris, it's U.S.
These players don't have any jobs now, so they should get on a crack at the NFL. Their livelihoods.
Chris, United States District Judge Edward J. DeWitt issued the orders after hours of arguments by attorneys for the NFL and attorneys for 17 former World Football League players. Have we heard the end of this, or does this keep going up through into the Supreme Court?
I have a feeling Rozell's going to fire a shot, but now that he's overruled the jumping, which makes you wonder, are Zonka, Kick, and Werfel going to be back for the Dolphins-Bills rematch in December?
No, that's a horrible thought as from a Bills fan's perspective. I don't even know if I want to think about that. The Buffalo Bills have value, and the NFL keeps the Pro Bowl. Charles, let's talk about the Pro Bowl first. The NFL owners keep the All-Star Game for another 2 years. The NFL Pro Bowl played at the end of the season, whereas in baseball, basketball, and hockey, it's in the middle. How important is the Pro Bowl? Charles?
For about 6 years, but they'll give the players a chance to showcase, to get in the spotlight without the pressure of the playoffs. And also, I think the proceeds of the Pro Bowl go to the players' pension funds.
Chris, the story on the Bills here, it's Vic Washington, Buffalo's free safety, was given the game ball in the victory over the Jets. He's a former All-Pro running back turned to defense, and Buffalo's defense really kept him in the game late after the Jets had built a 13-point lead.
It's really kind of ironic because, at times, the defense had, some people have said that's the weakness of the Bills. But when you look at it with some key takeaways, a couple of things, sometimes it can look leaky, but there are times when it matters most, they'll come up big.
Charles, we got a little comic strip here, Trim's Arena, and it looks like the field goal is so powerful it's sending a lineman right through the uprights.
Probably at Candlestick Park.
It's interesting to see comics from the era. Of course, this is the Buffalo Evening News on November 5th. Just something to add in, a nice little feature. It's not breaking news or anything, but people had fun even back then. And that came out. Yes, people had fun, comic strips and stuff even back then. Chris, the Browns might try something new. Dunkirk grad Dave Graff may start at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Or linebacker, sorry. May start at linebacker for the Cleveland Browns.
Why not? I mean, you're winless. You're in a monster division. You've pretty much got nothing to lose at this point. Why not? Their defense is already terrible. He's not going to make it any worse.
I agree.
Charles, the college football players of the week's Jeff Weston from Notre Dame. He had 12 tackles and a 53-yard touchdown run from an interception for the Irish, and then Chuck Muncie of Cal, yep, helped in the upset over USC. Jeff Weston, Chuck Muncie, deserved awards, Player of the Week.
Yes, oh yeah. Well, 12 tackles, that's pretty impressive.
12 tackles and a pick 6.
Yes, all the more reason.
Moving on to November 6th, this would be Thursday. We got a lot to unpack on this page. World Football League players have won judgment in federal courts, and the NFL may allow them to be signed. Cincinnati Bengals preview and the San Diego Chargers having a rough season. NFL wavering on the WFL ban with the federal judge ruling. The NFL is still not confirmed 100% that those players can sign. Charles, what's keeping Commissioner Rozelle? Why won't he allow them in?
Girl, you could say. Maybe a grudge or something.
And Chris, the Cincinnati Bengals They lost last week, so of course the newspapers are going to come down on a team anytime they lose. There's a Bob Trumpy pictured here. What do the Bengals need to do to get back on track?
Well, the problem with Cincinnati is, they're good at throwing the ball, but this is an era when you need to run first and foremost. They don't have that OJ, they don't have that Franco, they don't have that like that guy you can just give to tote the rock. They're a little like Dallas in terms of very dependent on the throw in an era in which basically you run the daylight, to quote Lombardi.
Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker Andy Russell said that Bob Trumpy, the Bengals tight end, is the key to the Bengals running game. And I stopped to mention that because it is kind of timely that he was featured in this newspaper as he recently passed away 50 years later. Bob Trumpy, one of the voices of our childhood, watching football on NBC growing up, as he was a color man for NBC Sports, and before that was a tight end with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Now, Vinny, obviously you've seen a lot of Bob Trumpy games, whether with Don Criqui or Dick Enberg. When you think Trumpy, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
It's a rare memory. It's actually from a preseason game, Atlanta and Buffalo, where Dick Enberg had a new partner and said he was working through the alphabet and he made it to the T's in Bob Trumpy.
I'm going to go with the obvious.
Broadcaster first and foremost.
I thought you were going to go with the obvious Leon Lett play.
Oh, no, Leon Lett. Charles, little guys can play big football too. This is a story about Rusty Hafer. He's a Vandalia guard. This is up in Dayton, Ohio. He's 5'11". Not little to me. He's taller than me, but as an offensive lineman, at 5'11", 150 pounds, that is pretty small.
Well, I'm 5'8". I'm probably about 170 pounds along those lines. That may be another reason why my mom would not let me play ball, because she was really fearful for me going up against those 7-foot tall players, those running backs.
Yep. Now we got some
anyway.
Statistical leaders. The leading running back in the NFL right now is O.J. Simpson, and look at the difference, Charles. Mercury Morris is almost 500 yards behind him.
Holy wow! Simpson's really out there.
He's got 1,000 yards and we're barely past Halloween.
Chris, is he going to have another 2,000-yard season?
I think he's got a better chance. But remember, 2 years ago, the Bills couldn't throw the ball. But now that the Bills have a great passing game, now it's like, well, you got to pick your poison. And if you want to load up on the pass, then, hey, ask the Steelers. And at this rate, OJ might pass it. Because remember, unlike 1973, the Bills have a running game now and a passing game now.
Speaking of passing, Joe Ferguson is in second place. I believe this is... it looks like it's not yards. Is it attempts? Yes. No?
No, it's true. Joe Ferguson is the NFL leader in passing yards, and Tarkenton leads in passing yards, but Ferguson is tied for the most touchdown passes.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
category. And Ferguson leads average gain at 8.16. Well, credit to Greasy of the Dolphins at 8.47 average gains.
What a surprise. A Bill is number 2, and he's outdone by a Dolphin.
The leading receiver might shock you. It's a running back from Minnesota, Chuck Foreman. 34 yards or 34 receptions, but in second place is another running back, Lydell Mitchell, with 33 receptions from the Colts.
Foreman's a knockout here. Not to be confused with a boxer of the same name.
Does this say more about the production of the running backs or the lack of a top-tier wide receiver in the league?
Could be. The WFL players can sign. This is now Friday, November 7th, so now the WFL players can sign with the NFL, but must be in by the 26th of November. They have a deadline. They have 19 days, Charles, to sign with the NFL.
Almost 3 weeks. Yeah, a little time to interview with a couple teams, and maybe we'll go and negotiate a deal, maybe a prorated deal for this year and next year. I'm no expert when it comes to legal contracts and everything, so
Chris, here's an interesting note. All 28 teams can sign World Football League players, meaning Seattle and Tampa Bay, who don't play a game until next September, they can sign WFL players now.
I really feel like, hey, Daryl LaMonica might be back in pro football. And there's going to be some quarterback needy team that may want to go after the Mad Bomber.
Daryl LaMonica. You mentioned the Dolphins guys, not to mention a quarterback like Sonny Sixkiller, who never really got a shot in the NFL. Detroit team that's struggling, they could be looking at some of those quarterbacks. November 7th, this is Friday. Here's a little preview of the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, Georgia and Florida. And the Steelers and Oilers are going to be playing on Sunday, a big matchup in the AFC Central. Chris, what are you looking forward to in the weekend, November 8th and 9th, in the college and the NFL?
Well, I think the game that's actually of the most importance is probably that Houston-Pittsburgh game because, again, Pittsburgh, they beat Cincinnati, but can they do it again? Because you figure if they can beat both Cincy and Houston, and they don't play Oakland this year, you figured maybe they are going to do it again.
Navy and Miami played on a Friday night. The midshipmen sank the Hurricanes 17-16, trailing 16-3 at half. The midshipmen pitched a second-half shutout, got a touchdown, and then went ahead in the fourth on a pick six. With their comeback, Navy clinched their first winning season since 1967. Charles Gene Ford had a 24-yard pick six to sink the Hurricanes. If our Navy could do this...
Sound like he's driven a Ford lately. And I'd be really proud of this Navy team. I know my dad, who served in the Navy during the Vietnam War, is proud of Navy too.
Chris, if our Navy could do this to real Hurricanes, we'd be onto something, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And keep in mind, this is a Miami team that, remember, this is a team that played their asses off against Nebraska and Oklahoma.
It's Saturday morning now, November 8th. We're getting ready for college football, and Ernie Roberts' opinion column out of Boston says New England fans have to be fair to Chuck Fairbanks. Charles, with the Patriots not living up to what Chuck Fairbanks would like, we mentioned earlier about John McKay coming in the NFL. Is this a harbinger of things to come for Tampa Bay, that maybe hiring a college coach is a mistake?
Well, based on what we've seen here, with a few exceptions, maybe can be a bit of a mistake because coaching college football and coaching the pros, you're comparing apples to oranges. So we're equipped to coach the apples, but not the oranges, and vice versa.
New England Small College Football Roundup. Let's take a look at that. UConn finds Zing rocks Boston University 52-10. These games on Sunday night, of course. We talked about the Eagles being Princeton's air game is a challenge to Harvard as they get ready to battle Bowdoin and Tufts in a runoff. And Ron Bible, he's what story is this from? That the new Harvard-Princeton game? Yep. Ron Bible is going to be giving out the 10 Commandments in that game. And Boston College taking on Army. A lot of big games in the New England area, Chris, for college football on this Saturday.
And you could argue that those teams probably have more talent than the Patriots do.
Charles, take a look at that Connecticut helmet. That's an interesting one.
Wow.
Rich Hedspeth, who in the fourth quarter scored UConn's final touchdown in a 52-10 rout of Boston University. Escapes diving tackle by Terriers Terry Thompson, say that name 10 times fast, and goes on for a game.
Terry Thompson. Terry Thompson. And these little dancing skills might come into play to escape those tackles just like that.
Chris, a lot of big news coming out of the Boston area football today. It's official. William H. Sullivan is now the chairman of the board for the Patriots. He owns the majority stock of his football team.
Took him so long. I mean, hey, it took him so long. I mean, now he officially owns the team, just like the Yankees own the Red Sox.
Charles, does one owner in Boston help change their fortunes and propel them to a potential Super Bowl in the future?
If he's willing to spend the dollars to put a competitive team on the field, then perhaps.
Tank McNamara is a Boston area comic strip, and this week, Chris, we've got a football theme. It's a sports comic. This week is a football theme. Somebody want to go ahead and read it?
And the world's oldest place kicker attempts the field goal. Boom! Stretcher! There's some fellow who's got his head bashed to a point.
That's an interesting note. World's oldest field goal kicker. George Bland is out of the league now. Is this Boston taking a shot at Oakland?
No, actually, George Bland is still kicking for the Raiders.
What Tom Dempsey would think of this comment?
we do have a transaction on this Saturday. It's official. We already
That's
talked
the
about
same.
it. Billy Sullivan completed his purchase of the Patriots voting stock. He and his cousin Mary are now 100% owners of all the stock for the New England Patriots. This will not ever become a Green Bay situation. How about this, Charles? We thought Jim Plunkett's season was done, but he's ready to return. Steve Grogan will start. Andy Johnson will be in the backfield, but Mac Herron and Jim Plunkett are ready.
What? Jim Plunkett with the Patriots?
Oh, yeah.
We thought his season was over.
I think of Jim Plunkett. I think of him with the two Bay Area teams. First with the Niners, and then later with the Raiders. I didn't know Plunkett played for the Patriots.
He was drafted by the Patriots in 1971.
One Rookie of the Year. Actually, has pulled some upsets that year.
Well, I mean, when I think of the Patriots in those days, the late 70s, I think of this young quarterback named Steve Grogan. I just saw on the paper.
Georgia and Florida, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Georgia surprises the 11th-ranked Gators 10-7. 10-7. Interesting score, being what's happening 50 years later. The game-winning 80-yard touchdown pass was not thrown by Ray Goff or backup Matt Robinson. It was a tight end, Richard Appleby. But the Bulldogs still didn't claim victory until 2 defensive stops by the Junkyard Dogs in the final 3.5 minutes.
Many like this game. My father did not.
And we have the game-winning touchdown. As here is the handoff to tight end Ron Appleby, and he's got the appetizers as he finds Gene Washington. Yes, a third receiver named Gene Washington is with the Georgia Bulldogs, 80 yards for the touchdown.
What? Scouts are at this game seeing what kind of an arm he's got.
Maybe they probably, if anything, they were probably there to see Goff or Robinson. But again, it wasn't them who threw it.
Georgia Tech and Notre Dame. We're going to talk about this game here in just a second. Something else big happened in this game that wasn't mentioned in the radio broadcast then, but a movie would be made about 20 years later. But first, the game. Number 12, Notre Dame stings the Yellow Jackets 24-3. The Irish defense held Georgia Tech's vaunted rushing attack to 143 yards. Doesn't sound impressive on the surface, but going into South Bend, these Yellow Jackets were number 1 in college football, 376.4 rushing yards per game. But Charles, one of the bigger memories that came out of this game is Rudy.
That's right.
Now this is...
I'll be featured in that movie, The Underdog kind of kid, 20 years later.
Yeah, this is the original. This is the actual picture of Rudy in uniform for this game against Georgia Tech. Now, of course, we found out since that, especially from comments from Joe Montana, that a lot of the story depicted in the movie didn't actually happen that way. But still, it's a great story, and it's kind of ironic that when he gets his sack and is carried off the field, it's not mentioned by the announcers. They don't mention who got the sack. Chris,
Speaking of Rudy, have any of you guys ever actually seen the Rudy movie?
you know what? I got an interesting story about this movie. I watched it in college with my roommate, and he thought it was complete fiction. He didn't realize it was a real story. I had to convince him. This is back in 97, 98. So I had to actually get on his computer and look up the actual story of Rudy Rudiger and prove to him that it was based on a true story. As Joe Montana has told us since then that the whole Jersey thing didn't happen. But hey, it's a feel-good movie, and it's a real feel-good story.
Charles, did you ever see Rudy?
No, I haven't.
I have.
North Carolina State and Penn State. The Wolfpack take a bite out of the Nittany Lions 15-14. The Lions blew a 14-point lead thanks to 15 unanswered North Carolina State points. Last week, Penn State escaped when Maryland missed a late 40-yard field goal. This week, turnabout was fair play as Chris Barr's 46-yard field goal was no good. Live by the kick, die by the missed kick, Charles. Penn State.
That's the second straight year that this Wolfpack upset Joe Paterno's Nittany Lions. Holy cow!
That's an interesting note. They're on a losing streak to the Wolfpack. Chris, don't turn your back on the Wolfpack.
By the way, you think some NFL team might be desperate enough to hire Lou Holtz? I mean, hey, you think some team may want to give him a pro shot?
Yeah, there's probably somebody out there.
Maybe somebody in Queens.
The number 6 Wolverines pummeled Purdue 28-0. Methodical Michigan, in a change of pace, actually won this game through the air. Wide receiver Jim Smith scored an 83-yard touchdown en route to catching 5 passes for 184 yards. Chris, Wolverines, they know they've got a showdown coming up with Ohio State in just a couple weeks. They need to keep winning. They're number 6 in the nation. Can they catch Ohio State?
Well, I think the 2 ties are, because even if they beat them, the 2 ties are going to be costly. I think the Baylor one more so, whereas Stanford's been pretty decent. Even if they beat Ohio State and they could get to Pasadena, but again, which Michigan is this? Is this the team that looks good against Missouri, or is this the one that tied Baylor and Stanford?
Charles, we talked about Gordon Bell last week. He's gone over the 1,000-yard mark for the Wolverines on the ground. He may not be the famous Ricky Bell, but he is another Bell that's tolling touchdowns and yards for Michigan.
And definitely helping keeping keeping the Wolverines' title hopes within somewhat reach. But as Chris said, they gotta be Ohio State and hope a lot of other teams that have them lose, which I highly doubt.
Ohio State versus Illinois. The number 1 Buckeyes pummeled the Illini 40-3. It was business as usual for the mighty Buckeyes. Another 100-yard day for Archie Griffin, 130 on a touchdown. Pete Johnson scored 2 more, and it's just another day at the mill for the Buckeyes. Their defense getting a pick 6, and Archie Griffin hit his 30th 100-yard game in his career.
And 5,000 yards right now total for Griffin in his collegiate career.
Chris, Illinois did score first, but 3 points wouldn't be enough on this day.
It's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Kansas and Oklahoma. The Jayhawks chalked the number 2 ranked Sooners 23-3. Charles, the 28-game win streak is over. Kansas didn't have any passing yards.
Maybe there's some hope for Michigan. Maybe there's a way to have a hope for Michigan after all. If the Jayhawks if the Sooners not only lose, but get walloped 23-3.
They didn't have any
I guess the Sooners can kiss their title hopes goodbye.
Chris, Kansas didn't have any passing yards, but 235 rushing yards, and basically canceled out Oklahoma's 265. But the difference in the game, the Oklahoma Sooners turned it over 6 times, and they had a punt blocked.
At the start, in our earlier podcast, we talked about Oklahoma. They were struggling against Miami. They struggled against Texas. They had some close calls. They've had these turnover issues. It finally caught up to them.
They called a trap game for the Kansas, but he assumed that we're going to have maybe a bigger game in a week or two.
They don't play Nebraska until later in the month. It's not like Nebraska next week. But by the way, now Nebraska all of a sudden. By the way, how does this look for Nebraska now?
It definitely opens up a spot for Nebraska. We got another battle down in the Longhorn State. SMU and Texas A&M. Number 4 A&M rides roughshod over the Horn. That's not the Horned Frogs, they're the Mustangs, SMU. After a recent string of close calls, the Aggies finally put together a complete game. Their offense got an 84-yard touchdown pass. The defense forced 4 fumbles and a 48-yard fumble return for a touchdown. And their special teams got 3 field goals from Tony Franklin. Charles, Texas A&M, there's a lot of buzz in college football with Oklahoma going down. Texas A&M trying to fill a spot in that region with a huge win.
I was just wanting to give them a chance. I think of the word Horned Frog, I think of TCU, not the SMU.
Yeah, this is a typo on our part. That's SMU is the Mustangs.
My bad.
All right, Nebraska and Kansas State. With Oklahoma going down, Nebraska shuts out Kansas State 12-0. The Big Reds defense held Kansas State to 6 first downs and 131 total yards. Their offense didn't light it up as they did against Colorado, but 267 yards rushing to 84 for the Wildcats. It was more than enough to prevail on the road. Chris, Nebraska, they unleashed their linebackers, Jim Whiteman and Cletus Pylon, as they pile on the Wildcats in this game. The Big 8 is now theirs to lose.
I mentioned the yards of total. Listen to this. Kansas State, through the first 3 quarters, had 2 first downs. 2.
Definitely not looking like a bunch of Wildcats, more like a bunch of lazy fat cats. Hey, maybe somebody should make a cartoon like that. Texas and Baylor, back in the Texas-themed matchups.
Yeah.
Number 7, Texas rips the Bears 37-21. Last year, Baylor shocked the Longhorns en route to ending their streak of 6 straight conference titles and Cotton Bowl appearances. But this year, Texas got revenge thanks to Earl Campbell's 133 yards and 2 touchdowns. Charles, Texas, back in the winning ways against Baylor. Was last year just a nightmare for the Longhorns that they had to prove didn't exist?
Yeah, yes. A revenge game, redemption. I was number 2 CC getting pummeled. Texas gonna move up in the rankings.
Chris, who's the best running back? Who's the best running back in college football?
I think it's kind of hard to measure because you have to look at the conferences. There's your Earl Campbells, there's your Chuck Muncies, there's your Ricky Bells. A lot of people want to talk about Archie Griffin, but the thing is that Earl Campbell is unlike some of the other guys we mentioned. He's going to be around for a few years. Remember, Ricky Bell doesn't have all the years of eligibility. This is Archie Griffin's senior year. We got a few more years of Earl Campbell, who might be the best of the bunch.
You didn't even mention Pete Johnson, who's also a 1,000-year.
And in those days, the clear athletes played all 4 years as opposed to now.
That is a big point. We don't have the underclassmen leaving college football in 1975. It's just not a thing yet. And Stanford and USC, the Cardinal. USC's lost 2 in a row now. The Cardinals shock number 9 Trojans. The Trojans were their own worst enemy on this day, wasting Ricky Bell's 195 yards rushing and 3 turnovers. One of them with a minute remaining. It set off a walk-off Cardinal field goal and a rare 2-game losing streak for SC. Ensured that they will not be Rose Bowl bound for the first time in 4 years. Charles, are they out of the rankings after this weekend?
Yeah. But there were 2 losses. And for the first time in nearly a decade, we'll have a new team in the Rose Bowl.
Charles, Chris, this is interesting. We know that just recently Stanford changed their name from Indians to Cardinals. When did they drop the S and become just the Cardinal?
I wish I knew. It's like the finding out how many licks it takes to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop. The world may never know.
That'll be something we can definitely keep our eyes out in the future of Pigskin Glory. When did the Cardinals become the Cardinal?
By the way, as for USC, I think John McKay. Let me ask you this: what did John McKay think of his offense's execution against Stanford?
He was in favor of it. Charles, that's a good point. Since the John McKay announcement, USC hasn't won a game.
Oh, God. Let's not wait till after the season was over. Then you make your announcement.
I mean, you go from number 3 in the nation to can it get a bowl fringe bowl?
We got playoffs up in Canada. The Blue Bombers and Rough Riders in the West semifinal. It's the Rough Riders bombing the Bombers 42-24. Ron Lancaster has said this would be his final home game. He delivered a dramatic flourish in his Regina final with 4 touchdown passes. Saskatchewan rolled to a 35-8 halftime lead before putting it on cruise control and set up a rematch of a recent wild 48-41 game against Edmonton. Chris, Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, do they have what it takes to knock off Winnipeg or Edmonton?
I think they have a chance because if you remember, they outgained them in that 48-41 game, but what did them was special teams, all the return touchdowns. But don't forget, unlike the last time they played, they're not going to have their jersey stolen.
Let's take a look at this picture real quick. So that is Winnipeg quarterback Ralph Brock, as he is under constant pressure all day Saturday from George Wells to Saskatchewan. Rough Riders beat Winnipeg. Chris, that's an interesting picture. George Wells, he's avalanching Ralph Brock. Do you think he'll ever... Oh, no, that's George Wells, WrestleMania 2. He's putting a snake bit on Ralph Brock. Do you think George Wells will be a big name in the future?
Well, let's put it this way. Brock, on this day, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers played like they got DDT'd.
For those who might not know, George Wells, of course, was Jake the Snake Roberts' WrestleMania 2 opponent, and a lot of people mainly remember that he was foaming at the mouth while Damien was slithering all over a unconscious George Wells' body. Here he is sacking Winnipeg quarterback Ralph Brock. A much better day for Wells than in 1986.
Uh-oh.
Alabama and LSU. The number 5 Bama rolls passed the Tigers 23-10. After the recent run of blowout wins, the Tide had a tough game by their standards in Death Valley. But Alabama's defense picked off 5 passes and got 11 points for their kicker for Bear Bryant's 250th win as a head coach. Charles, 250 wins in college football. What kind of accomplishment? Where does this rank him all time?
It's going among the best. I mean, if you play 10 college football games a year, and to win that many games, you have to coach for 30 years at least and be tremendous in each of them to get to that milestone.
Chris, we're going back with wins back to his days at Texas A&M, and of course now with Alabama. Bear Bryant, one of the all-time greats. How much longer does he go?
I think it also depends. I think he wants another title or two along the way. Remember, this is a team that went undefeated in the regular season. They had a couple of chases at the title the last 2 years before Notre Dame did it in. Bear wants to think, hey, maybe this will be the charm because he wants another title.
Wyoming and Arizona State, number 10 ranked Sun Devils, edged the Cowboys 21-20. Arizona had a tougher than expected tussle with the Cowboys after last week's 10-turnover masterpiece versus Utah, but Freddie Williams' 174 yards and 2 scores plus a touchdown catch from John Jefferson were more than enough on a Saturday night in Tempe. Charles, Arizona State, they struggled against an unranked Wyoming team. Are they for real?
They're going to say, well, cats. Yes, they are for we. They are indeed for we. I mean,
Sun Devils.
The Sun Devils, right? And there was a 1 point win. A win is a win. And speaking of wins, there's my motto to do it again. This time beating New Mexico 29-20, and we're now 8-1.
Rick,
and if you remember, Charles, they barely lost that Cal game in the last. If they could be undefeated, remember they barely lost to Cal.
Rick Kane, his 30 carries for 157 yards and a defense. It's got to be Kane. It's got to be Kane. San Jose State 8-1. Great season they're having in Northern California.
Oh, by the way, don't forget, Charles, they beat Stanford, the team that tied Michigan.
Yeah.
It's Sunday morning now. You open up your newspaper. You see that Michigan State beats Indiana 14-6. Rutgers way over Lafayette. Marietta over Muskingum. West Virginia Wesleyan a winner. Tennessee beats Utah 40-7. Yale over Penn. We talked about Michigan. William and Mary get a win over VMI. Boston College shuts out Army. Susquehanna beats Waynesburg. Williams a winner over Wesleyan. UMass beats Holy Cross. Ithaca, that's getting into my area. Ithaca beating Rochester Tech 41-0. Let's take a look. West Virginia in the backyard brawl over Pittsburgh 17-14. Albany State downs Plattsburgh State. Plattsburgh is where the area that I grew up in, about an hour from my hometown. They lose. I didn't even know they had football. They lose to Albany State 66-12. Maybe that's one of the reasons they don't have football anymore. Brown over Cornell, Eastern Michigan over Illinois. Appalachian State beats South Carolina 39-34. Princeton knocking off Harvard 24-20. Clemson, oops. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Clemson knocking off North Carolina 38-35. Slippery Rock over Clarion 17-14. Maryland down Cincinnati 21-19. Duke over Wake Forest. It's not basketball. Duke beats Wake Forest in football. Minnesota over Northwestern. Temple over Rhode Island. Just a look. Delaware over Maine. There's a lot of college football, a lot more than we report. Tufts over Bowdoin. We can't sit here and talk about all the college football that goes on, or else we'd be a 4-hour podcast, and that wouldn't be fun. The Giants, the NFL preview, the Giants, Cowboys aim at Allen's Indian sign. We look at Giants quarterback. No, Giants haven't beaten George Allen, but Craig Morton's Dallas beat him in 1972. Can Craig Morton beat the Redskins for the Giants on this Sunday? Chris.
Remember the last time the Giants played Washington, they got absolutely pummeled in week 2. So you figure they're going to put up a better fight this time.
Whether Zonka, Kick, Warfield, Bonacani, Anderson, and Hines go rolling along in their championship personality unchanged, the Dolphins have some new faces like Don Nottingham. He's scoring rushing touchdowns. Don Shula is still an outstanding coach, and as long as the Dolphins have him, Charles, the Dolphins are always going to be in it.
Wow.
And I know that's got to bug Vinny. They lose all those guys, and it's like, yeah.
Oilers have a pocket in their miracle. Charles Dan Pastorini, he's got the Oilers. People are talking about him, and they're in battling for a playoff. Pastorini.
And this game against Pittsburgh is going to be a very big test.
And we got other big games: the Jets at the Dolphins, Redskins at the Giants, Chiefs and Cowboys on Monday night. Chris.
Yeah, I think that comes down to which Chiefs are going to show up: the one that pummeled Oakland, or the one that gave up, or the one that scored 3 points against the Niners.
I'm gonna New York metropolitan area, Columbia streaks snapped. They lose to the Big Green of Dartmouth, 22-17. The Ithaca Bombers are 8-0 on the season. That's in small college, Division III football. Where I went to college for a week back in 1999, Brockport is one of the teams that out of Rochester that plays Ithaca every year. Ithaca, Cortland, Brockport, Rochester, RIT, just a lot of the smaller colleges around New York State being represented. Army and Rutgers.
By the way, Vinny, stop. You've heard this before. Columbia football loses again.
4 touchdown rushes as Boston College lasters Army. Rutgers blast Lafayette. It was Kurt Edwards of Boston College scoring 4 touchdowns and 122 yards for them as Boston College knocked off Army. Oh, Charles, we have another cartoon.
That makes 15 completion. Unfortunately, there were 6 to the opposition.
Imagine that stat line, Charles. You're 9 for 15, but 6 interceptions.
Well, at least the ball's never hit the ground. All right. We have this newspaper out of New York City has a grid pick'em contest. You can back then you can fill out this sheet and send it in for a chance to win. No postcards, please. It was a $5,000 prize to the winners.
Interesting. They list only 5 pro games. They don't list Washington, St. Louis. That's a little surprising.
Yeah.
Whoever the Raiders are playing.
Right in the other semifinal game in the CFL, Les Alouettes, Charles, tamed the Tiger Cats 35-12. The East semifinal was a contrast in momentum.
Montreal. Oui.
Montreal had lost a showdown in Ottawa by 40, while Hamilton won their way in beating Toronto by a margin they had to. But you wouldn't have known it with how the Alouettes jumped all over the Ticats with a 24-0 lead and more than held up. Johnny Rogers scored a touchdown. Joe Petty caught 2 scores and held Hamilton to just 14 yards. As Alouettes head coach Marv Levy has them rolling as they head into their Eastern final against Ottawa, Charles.
I wanted to play it anyway to Aaron Rodgers.
I don't know.
He's the former Heisman Trophy winner. He's the former Heisman winner from Nebraska. Scored that famous touchdown again on Thanksgiving.
Chris, we have to mention Montreal head coach Marv Levy, being that we're recording this podcast on Veterans Day, and Marv posting a video today. He's 100 years old and still going strong. He posted a video about his time in World War II, and it's amazing to see him still up and moving and looking good in 2025, as he was the head coach of Montreal way back in 1975.
Are one of his most famous quotes, "Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?"
Washington and the Giants. The Redskins cut the Giants down to size 20-14. The Redskins seemed to have a letdown after their overtime conquest of Dallas hangover, trailing the 3-5 New York Giants after 3 quarters, 13-7. But the team will personify as 40 men together can't lose did it once again, this time rushing for 2 fourth-quarter scores and allowing none. With St. Louis also coming from behind, this sets up a massive NFC East collision next Sunday at Busch Stadium. Charles, the Redskins still in the playoff hunt, the Cardinals in the playoff hunt. How important was this win for the Redskins?
Very vital to the Redskins' cause.
Remember, this is the sandwich game. Dallas last week, St. Louis next week.
Chris, in the game...
And please be aware of the old trap games, too.
Chris, in a game between 2 teams that were champions in the 50s and struggling here in 75, Lions beat the Browns 21-10. As I said, the 2 teams combined for 6 championships in the 1950s, and the Lions, at now 5-3, thanks to a pick 6, appear to be closer to vintage form than Cleveland, who has fallen and can't get up.
Remember when the Browns could actually win a football game? Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Oilers and Steelers. Pittsburgh stops Houston 24-17. In a battle of 6-1 team, the Oilers twice battled back from 10-point deficits to tie the game up. But in crunch time, Pittsburgh got the winning touchdown through the air. Bradshaw to Stallworth for 21 yards. If the Bengals and Oilers couldn't stop Pittsburgh, who outside of O.J. Simpson in Week 2 can? Charles, let's take a look at this game-winning touchdown pass from... Why isn't it showing it to me? There we go.
Huh. Think about it with... you think about it with Houston, you trail twice, but then you come all the way back. And remember, Houston won at Pittsburgh the year before.
And there's a reason the Steelers are what they are. That Steelers current defense and that deadly combination of Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris. The Oakland Raiders about that 3 years ago.
You think we'll see them again? You think they'll face off again in the playoffs?
Anything's possible.
This is weird. I cannot access the comment, and I posted it. It's the touchdown pass from Bradshaw to Stallworth. No visible comments. I wonder why. Did it get blocked? It's weird. Anyway,
I don't know.
Terry Bradshaw hitting John Stallworth on a 21-yard touchdown pass to win the game. St. Louis stops Philadelphia 24-23. Coming off their Monday night humiliation, the Eagles came out with a fire in their eyes against St. Louis, jumping all over the Big Red and leading 23-7. But against the Cardiac Cards, no score is too much, no lead is safe. Terry Metcalf and Jim Hart had 2 touchdown runs. Philly had 2 critical turnovers, and St. Louis kicked a game-winning field goal on the final play. The Eagles invented another way to lose, Chris, and the Cardinals found yet another way to win.
In Philadelphia, wonder what's worse: getting hammered by the Rams, or blowing a 3-score lead in an era before 2-point conversions.
I think the latter.
The Colts and Bills as Baltimore shocks Buffalo 42-35. The Bills jumped out to a 21-0 lead behind 3 O.J. Simpson touchdowns. At 28-7, it looked like business as usual, and then the roof fell in as Baltimore scored 5 straight touchdowns in a stunning turn of events. Charles, this game proved 2 things about the 1975 AFC East. The Colts are progressing faster than expected, and Buffalo's pass defense is a complete and utter liability.
I wonder if this is going to come back to bite the Bills.
I mean, again, you're up 20. Think about it. They've lost their 3 losses. They've blown double-digit leads, all at home.
Falcons and Vikings. Minnesota mauls Atlanta 38-0 after a recent stretch of tight division games. The Vikings put the pedal to the metal against Atlanta, a team playing without Steve Bartkowski. Despite only throwing for 59 yards, Minnesota got 220 yards rushing, and Chuck Foreman scored 3 touchdowns as Minnesota improved to 8-0. Charles, the Vikings, more than halfway through the season now, 8-0. Well, who is going to beat them?
Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers? The Cowboys?
And you look at Minnesota's schedule, they don't play the Rams, they don't play the Cardinals, they don't play the Cowboys, but they do play Washington on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and they play Buffalo in the final week of the season. Those might be the teams that can get them.
I do want to post a sad note, as one of our followers mentioned, that the storm that affected the Minnesota-Atlanta game was the same storm that would sink the Edmund Fitzgerald on the next night. And, of course, there's a very famous song about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
How about that, Vinny? We got a comment from an outsider. So someone joined us.
Yep, Packers and Bears. Bears down Green Bay 27-14 in the league's oldest rivalry. Both teams came in at 1-6. Both teams had 2 sacks and 3 turnovers, but Chicago came out on top thanks to rushing for 148 yards and a pick 6 from the defense. Charles, does anybody really care, though?
No, not really.
You know, they don't say you have to throw records out the book window into the rivalry. In this case, you have to throw the records out.
Cincinnati beats Denver 17-16. The Bengals were facing a proverbial sandwich game. Steelers last week, Bills next week, but Cincy found a way to win at Mile High thanks to 163 yards rushing and winning the turnover battle 2-1. Chris, we mentioned it earlier. Denver's home field doesn't seem to exist, does it?
You know, they were at first place a few weeks ago, but we talk about games coming back to bite you. I think Denver losing that game in Kansas City took the wind out of their sails.
The Jets and Dolphins. Miami jolts the Jets 27-7. The Dolphins, who blew out New York 43-0 last month, had a rough ride in the Orange Bowl rematch as it was tied 7-7 at halftime. But Bob Greasy threw 2 touchdowns, Joe Namath threw 2 interceptions, and Freddie Solomon had a 50-yard punt return, all in the second half. With Miami at 7-1 and Bills blowing a 21-point lead, one has to wonder if Don Shula will ever be challenged atop the AFC East, even without Warfield and Zonka. Chris, with the Bills falling down the rankings, Miami's just running away with the division now. Do they have any competition left?
Theoretically, they've still yet to play Baltimore twice, but the Colts would have to win out. However, Miami does have to go to Houston in next week, and they play, they got to play Baltimore twice, and they got their edge with Buffalo, so they've got some losable games.
Charles, the 49ers shock LA 24-23. They fought back from a 14-0 deficit thanks to Steve Spurrier's, the all-quarterback's 290 yards and 3 touchdowns, while San Francisco got a 54-yard field goal with seconds left. 14-point underdog, San Francisco beats the Rams for the first time in 10 games dating back to 1970. They were
Steve Spurrier could be the 49ers quarterback of the future. If you remember last year, we went through 4 different quarterbacks.
The 49ers were edging neck and neck with the Bills' losing streak to the Dolphins. They were just one behind them. Now they're out of that losing streak, and Buffalo is way in first place, losing to Miami. Chris, the 49ers getting this win, how important is that for the other teams in the NFC that are looking for home field advantage? Minnesota, Washington, St. Louis, and even though Dallas lost to the Redskins last week, them.
It's big for Dallas because remember, the Rams lost to the Cowboys, so that helps them. And the thing is, it's probably not going to cost them the division, but because of the new seeding format, it also drops them a little bit behind the NFC East, and they don't play the Cardinals or the Redskins, so basically they might have to win out and hope they keep beating each other up, because that's pretty much going to take any chance they had of catching Minnesota might go down the drain here.
Saints and Raiders. Oakland routs New Orleans 48-10. The Silver and Black looked every bit of an 18-point favorite. They overwhelmed the Aints with 260 rushing yards, 4 sacks on Archie Manning, and 5 takeaways. We talked about Miami's dominance. Pittsburgh coming out of to take a commanding lead now in the AFC Central. Charles, the Raiders, don't want you to forget about them and their commitment to excellence.
Yeah, and John Mann's going to make sure of that against the Aints.
Just win, baby.
Patriots and Chargers. There was a lot of talk about the Patriots in the newspapers with their ownership, and they came out to play and zapped the Chargers 33-19. What's the best antidote for a 2-5 team that blew a 10-point lead versus the Cardinals? Playing the winless Chargers. New England racked up 7 sacks, got a pick 6, and got an efficient performance from Steve Grogan, who will now go the rest of the way. Well, I actually saw a Patriot newspaper, the Plunkett is ready. Charles, the Chargers, are they ever going to win a game?
Let me ask you this, Vinny. Would the Chargers beat a Canadian team? Could they beat Edmonton?
That's a good question. I never get into the argument versus college teams because it's pro versus men versus boys, but the CFL teams are grown men. They are professional football players, and I would think San Diego might want some of those Edmonton Eskimos on their team to replace the guys they got. All right, we got the college polls. This is now Monday, November 10th. The UPI top 20, the AP's top 20 have come out. Ohio State still number 1. Oklahoma, believe it or not, they're number 2 still. Charles, how did they keep the ranking at number 2 when Nebraska's undefeated?
This was out on, remember, it's on Tuesday this is before the new rankings come out. They're just announcing how the teams top 20 going into this week fared, because when we do episode 5, the Sooners are going to drop.
Oh, my apologies. This is Monday. I thought the new polls were out.
The polls come out, I think it's still Sunday. Well, either way, we don't know about the polls until after the Monday night game.
This poll does look identical to last Monday's. We have the 3-way tie for 15. So, nothing's changed here.
Go to the collegefootballarchive.com, and yes, the number 2 ranked is Nebraska now at.
Okay. Well,
And Oklahoma drops from 2-6.
I posted the wrong one, but we do have the AP top 15 from this past week. And just a note here, Boise State, this is the top 15 in the Associated Press for college division football, which is basically 1AA. Boise State is third at 8-0-1. Just a nice mention of them, as they are, of course, one of the more famous smaller colleges that's up in Division 1A or FCS nowadays, or FBS, I should say. Here's another interesting little note. Died on November 10th, 1975, Milt Romney, back from the Racine Legion, 1923-24, in the Chicago Bears from 25-28. And yes, he is a relative of future presidential candidate Mitt Romney. They're a second cousin, once removed, I believe. All right, guys, it's Monday Night Football and a way to end our week. The Chiefs and Cowboys, which we will be doing a watch-along, which you can find if you subscribe to us on Patreon at Vinny X Wolf. The Chiefs, Kansas City surprises Dallas 34-31. An incredibly wild and woolly offensive firefight with 5 lead changes and 8 touchdowns. The difference in this game was Dallas' 7 turnovers. None more costly than their fumble that Casey recovered, John Matuzak falling on the ball in the end zone for a touchdown. We wondered which Chiefs teams would show up on Monday night, the one that blew out Oakland or the one that scored 3 points versus home versus the 49ers. It turned out to be the former. And Charles, Dallas has now lost 2 in a row. Is the bottom completely falling out for the Cowboys?
Cowboys are hoping that that's the case. This is one of the rare losses for the Cowboys at this Texas stadium since they moved in there 4 years ago.
Preston Pearson on the fumble. This is the big touchdown that was mentioned in the profile. John Matuzak falling on it. Right before the fumble, Frank Gifford nailed the Cowboys with the announcer jinx as he was talking about the Chiefs' fumbles and how an earlier Cowboy fumble had also hurt them. And lo and behold, bam, Preston Pearson puts the ball on the ground.
You know, you don't know what to make of the Cowboys. I mean, again, are they the team that beat the Rams, or are they the one that lost to the Packers?
Well, guys, that's another 10 days in college football, or NFL 1975. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and bring myself back up in here. There we are. Big news. WFL players can sign. Haven't seen any sign yet. New sole ownership in New England. Cowboys losing 2 in a row. Bills stumbling against the Colts. Oklahoma going down. It's been a wild 10 days as November begins in 1975, and we still have got Thanksgiving to come with no Cowboys in action on that day.
Wow. Let me give you my big takeaway from these 10 days. Let me ask you this. Browns, Chargers, who's worse?
You got to say the Chargers because they haven't won yet.
Chargers.
But maybe if they play,
at least
be a chance for San Diego to get a win.
I'd have to, Cleveland has a much tougher schedule. They look at the teams in their division and they play Minnesota. The Chargers, they don't have to play like a Cincy or a Houston or a Pittsburgh in their division. Charles, what's your takeaway from this 10-day stretch?
The Bills stumbling, Oklahoma getting crushed, and the second straight year, Lou Holtz's Wolfpack upsets Penn State.
We have a Final Four in Canada. We'll be looking forward to talking about the finals and up there. San Jose State 8-1 for Charles. Georgia with a huge win. It's been a wild 10 days. And for Chris and Charles, I'm Vinny Vincent, and we will see you in 1975.